So today, guys, we're going to start talking about the business cycle and how it kind of fluctuates up and down. There's actually not that many slides to this PowerPoint, okay? So hopefully this will make a lot of sense to you, okay? Couple things that we're going to go over. There's some definitions or words, okay? But the nation's economy experiences periods of expansion, contraction, and all this other stuff, okay? So we need to know what this means. So the first thing I would write down is nation's economy. And I'm talking about the U.S., okay? The nation's economy. It's essentially going to be going through three ideas, okay? At any given point in time, three things could be happening. We could be expanding, which means our economy is growing. We could be contracting, which means things are slowing down. Or we could be at a stalemate, means that everything's just kind of sitting in place. It's stalled out. Y'all understand what I mean? So, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a little chart, and I'm going to show it to you on the smartboard, and we're going to label it here in a second. And then we're going to define some words that go along with it. Okay? So, beside a nation's economy, put down the word expansion. Equals growth. Obviously, we want that one to be doing it more than any other one, because if we're growing, that means there's more money being circulated, right? You guys remember circular flow? Now everything moves through it. So expansion equals growth. The second one, put down the word contraction. And that one means everything is slowing down. And I look at this like a set of lungs. When you breathe in, what's your lungs doing? Expanding, right? Taking in all that air. They're growing. When I breathe out, what's my lungs doing? Contracting, right? So, growth and slow down. It says this is called the business cycle. So beside of that, I draw me a little arrow coming off of both of them and just label it the business cycle. The ups and downs of the business cycle. Now, it says that each one of these phases, expansion and contraction, has certain characteristics. So we're going to draw what I'm referring to here. And I'm going to move my piece of paper over to the PowerPoint just for a second. Zoom in a little bit here. So here's what we're going to put down. Let's do this. There we go. But let me get it pulled up on my side here. So what I would like for you to do is just take a couple, 3 lines and kind of just do this right here. Kind of make a wave. See how I did that? Just kind of make a little wave, okay? So far, so simple. All right. And then what we're basically going to do is try to draw as straight of a line as we possibly can, which I know that's going to be difficult for some of you because you don't have a straight edge. But I'm OCD, so I'm going to try to make a straight edge. Draw a straight line kind of at an angle all the way through it. Something similar to that. Okay? Something similar to that. Okay? And now we're going to label some things. Okay? So where you're at, where this starts to go up, let me turn the lights off that way you guys can see. Where our line starts to go up, put the letter B right here. Okay? Then at the very top here, write the letter A. All this will make sense in a second, I promise. Okay? Where we drew the line straight through, put the letter D. Okay? Then at the very bottom, the letter C at the valley. Okay? So that's kind of the business cycle in a nutshell right there, guys. So let's kind of go through this. I'm going to minimize this if I can to where I can pull up the PowerPoint, and it won't let me do it. Can y'all read that still if I do it like this? All right. So what is the business cycle? The business cycle is a pattern of alternating periods of expansion and contraction in the economy, contraction in the economy. So we're going to jot that down. I'm going to move this out of the way for a second. So underneath our little drawing there, put down that the business cycle, and you can abbreviate if you need to, is alternating periods of growth and slowdowns in an economy. Alternating periods. Of growth and slowdown. Okay? In an economy. So what this is suggesting, that a business is going to experience what? Highs and what? Lows. Constantly up and down, up and down. Any business, it doesn't matter what you're trying to produce and sell, you're going to have up and downs. So we need to kind of figure out what these phases are, okay? So in your notes, I've actually drawn you one, okay? And it kind of labels them. You've got recession, peak, a trough, and then an expansion. It says the model of the business cycle looks like a roller coaster going up and down by trending upward over time. So what eventually happens, guys, and I know I can't make you see this on a piece of paper, but kind of think of it like this. Business, if I'm a business and I start at point A right here, with me, I'm going to start growing because I'm new, right? People are going to want to check me out. Well, eventually I'm going to hit what we call a peak. Y'all got me? And then once I hit that peak, it's just like the old saying, what goes up has to do what? Come back down. So my goal is for it to not, I started here, right? I don't want that to go all the way below that. Why? Because if I do, I've lost all my money and I've got problems, right? So I want that valley to be kind of stop right in here. And then it go back up higher than what it was, right? So I want it to kind of keep trending which way? Up. Even though I'm up and down, up and down, up and I still want it to be trending in an upward slope. Y'all with me there? So, with that being said, this is a picture of the business model. I'll put this on your Google Classroom and kind of show you how it works. But we're going to go through what all these little phases are. Okay? So, you labeled them on your paper, right? A, B, C, and D. So the business cycle has several phases. When the business cycle is moving upward, it is in an expansionary phase. So we're going to take letter B. Let me pull this over here so you guys can see what I'm looking at for notes purposes. So write down the letter B. And this, we're literally naming what is on the graph right now. Y'all with me? Letter B looks like it's going up, right? Everything's trending up. So that is an expansion phase. So what is happening during the expansion phase? Basically, if things are moving up, what do you think is happening to unemployment? If we're making more money, am I going to have more or less workers? More. I'm going to have more, right? So is unemployment going to be increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. Be going down, right? So in an expansion phase, put down unemployment decreases. Business is tending up. We're going to need more people to work, right? So unemployment decreases, means it goes down. Well, if unemployment is decreasing, what do you think is happening with our growth? Yeah, growth is increasing. We're getting bigger. Everything's going up. Y'all with me? So far, so simple? Makes sense? So when we're trending up, it's an expansion. All right, let's look at letter A now. And why I didn't do this A, B, C, D, I don't know. But I just did. So, when we get to letter A, what do you think that's being called?
Peak.
That's going to be called a peak. Let's look at our notes right here just to make sure we're not crazy. It says, ultimately, the economy will reach a what? If you'll notice right there, where we at?
Peak.
A peak, okay? We're at a peak. So simply write down beside of letter A the word peak. Now, once we have hit this peak, what's happening? When we peak out, unemployment is probably going to be at the highest or the lowest it's going to be. Which one? No, think about it. The lowest. We're going to have very few unemployed people, right? Because we've peaked. Our business is doing fantastic. Y'all got it? So, beside of the peak, write down lowest unemployment. Is this making sense? Y'all with me so far? But also at the peak, we're probably going to have a little bit of inflation, okay? Which means we've probably got too much money into the economy and our products may be moving too fast. And again, what goes up has to eventually do what? Yeah, it'll eventually have to start coming down. Which brings us to the letter D here. Now, if we look back at your little chart that you have in your notes, D says we're at a period of a what?
Trough.
A trough. Okay, so if you'll notice over here to the left, and we're going to go through these, it says a trough is when the economy will bottom out in that phase, where growth will be slow, prices are low, and unemployment is high. So in our notes, we're not, I'm sorry, I went to the wrong, I skipped one. We're not to a trough yet. We're to this point. I'm going to get my notes back over here. We're at letter D here. So what do you think that is? You'll notice there's nothing there, right? This is called the contraction phase. Contraction phase. Well, what is happening at a contraction phase? What's the word contraction mean? Everything's tightening up, right? We're not expanding anymore. Everything's shrinking. So at the contraction phase, what do you guys think is happening? It's probably going to be the opposite of an expansion, right? So let's just look at expansion. In an expansion phase, unemployment is doing what? It's going down, right? You've already wrote that part down. So what do you think in a contraction phase unemployment is doing?
Going up.
It's rising, yeah. So unemployment rises. Unemployment is going to rise during a contraction phase, okay? And then what do you think is happening to growth? Well, if growth is increasing during an expansion,
Slow it down.
then it's got to be slowing down during a contraction. So growth will decrease. So answer this question for me. What do you think demand is during an expansion phase? Do you think it's high or low? If we're expanding and our business is growing, what do you think's happening to the demand for whatever we're producing?
Growing.
It's high, right? A lot of people want it. Well, once we start contracting, what is the demand for our stuff starting to do?
Low.
It's starting to go down, right? So we've either got to figure out a way to either offer an incentive. You guys remember what an incentive is? What is an incentive? Not everybody at one time. What's an incentive? Cameron? Yeah, it changes their mind. So we're either going to have to offer them some type of incentive to make them change their mind about our product, or come out with something new where we can sell our product, right? So, contraction phase, unemployment rises, growth decreases, okay? Now, let's look back at our little paper here, and we've got the word trough all the way at the bottom. So when we hit rock bottom, so to speak, what do you think's happening? And what letter was that? What letter do we see? We have a trough. Pretty sure I just spelt that wrong. No, I didn't. Trough. Okay? Now, in our notes, we're still at we basically hit rock bottom. A trough is the opposite of a peak. So if at a peak we have the lowest unemployment, what do you think we're going to have at a trough? High unemployment, right? Really high unemployment. We're not producing as much, we're not selling as much, so we don't need as many people working. Y'all with me on that? So you have high unemployment. Now, what's happening to growth? If at the peak everything was pretty good, growth would be slowing down, right?
Yeah.
So slow growth. And as a business, what are we going to have to do to our prices in order to sell things through a trough? Remember, we're at rock bottom here. People really don't want our stuff, so what are we going to do to prices to try to make a little bit of money? Lower them. So you're going to have low prices. Okay? You have high unemployment, slow growth, and low prices. Okay? Now, that line that we drew through the middle where I put the letter D on it, we put down that that's a contraction phase where unemployment starts to rise and growth decreases. At that point in time, that is when businesses have to start figuring out, or hopefully they have already figured out, what it is they need to do to stay above that line. Does that make sense? They don't want to drop all the way down to here, because if they drop all the way down to here, it's highly unlikely that they're going to get all the way back up. Does that make sense? So they better start getting a plan somewhere in this general area, because when they get to this point, the business aspect becomes very difficult to overturn. Okay? So does anybody have any questions about those four ideas? Does that make sense, guys? All right, so let's flip back over here to your notes now. Move this out of the way. All right. So again, this just goes through what we just did. It talks about the expansion phase, which is up here. It talks about the peak. Then we talked about the contraction phase, then the trough, and then obviously going back up will be the expansion. Okay? Now, there's two other things that come along with this that we need to make sure we understand. In your notes, it asks you what is a recession and what is a depression. Now, both of these we can learn through looking at a business cycle. Okay? So, first, let's write down the word recession. And again, these are just definitions I need you to remember. All right? So, as far as your book definition or your SOL definition goes, a recession, guys, is a period of decline that is experienced over 2 consecutive quarters. Now, I know you don't know what that means, okay? But how many months are in a year? Y'all should know that. 12. If I say there's 4 quarters in a year, that means that I'm taking into consideration 3 months at a time. Y'all understand what I'm getting at there? 3 months at a time is a quarter. Y'all with me? Now, it says a recession is a period of declining economic activities. That means things are slowing down and it's hurting, okay? It says that it happens over 2 consecutive quarters. So basically a recession lasts how long in terms of months? Can y'all tell me? A recession happens in terms of months. We define it in terms of how long. If it's 2 quarters and each quarter is 3 months, A recession
6.
lasts about 6 months is what they are suggesting here, right? So, beside of the word recession, put down that it's a decline in economic activity. So are we expanding or contracting during a recession?
Okay.
We're contracting. So it's decline in economic activity for 2 quarters. And in parentheses beside the 2 quarters, how many months do I want you to write down?
6.
6 months. Now, can a recession last longer than that? Sure. Right? But that's what we typically designate it as. Okay? So a recession is a decline in economic activity for a little over 6 months, or somewhere in the general area of 6 months. Now, the last one we have here is a little bit more severe. Let's talk about a depression. Now, has the U.S. ever experienced a depression before?
Yeah.
Yes, it has. In the early part of the 20th century, we had the economic depression in 1929, right? So, a depression is also a decline in economic activity, but we're going to say that it lasts 3 or more years, okay? So, we're going to put down a prolonged economic downturn. Okay, it's a prolonged economic downturn. And it normally lasts, according to our book, 3 or more years. Okay? So a depression is exactly like a recession, but a depression lasts a lot longer, while a recession just kind of comes and goes. Okay? Now that's the business cycle. If I were to give you guys a quiz tomorrow, and I just give you this part right here. Oh, you can't see it. I'm sorry. Just this right here. And I said label and explain these letters. Do you think you could do it? Somebody told me there may be a pop quiz tomorrow that has this on it. Okay? That you don't know about. Alright? So does anybody have any questions about today? Does this make sense? Alright, that's all I have for you today. Okay?